system and international cooperation to ensure that nobody is left behind. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency for the statement, and now I have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Fayssal Mekdad, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates of the Syrian Arab Republic, by video message.
Mr. President, allow me at the outset to congratulate you upon your election to preside over the Human Rights Council and to wish you every success in presiding over the work of the Council this year. The establishment of the Human Rights Council represented an opportunity for a new start in the collective work through a cooperative approach based on sovereign equality among states and strengthening their capacities in accordance with their national priority. Hence, we stress the importance of preserving the role of the Council and its mechanisms as stipulated in the resolution that established it. We affirm that the Syrian Arab Republic continues its effort to develop and strengthen the legislative and institutional frameworks related to the protection and promotion of human rights and considers it a continuous national process based on the national needs and priorities. The Syrian Arab Republic always aspires to multilateral work in the field of human rights on the basis of the principles enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations and respect for sovereignty and national particularities. Syria renews its rejection of some countries' practices in this Council that seek to impose politicized resolutions and mechanisms that constitute a model blatant interference in the internal affairs of the independent countries, especially developing countries. It is also a violation of the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and exploitation of human rights concepts. Such approaches would lead to losing the Council's credibility and adversely affect the environment of international work in the field of human rights. The draft resolution entitled Situation of Human Rights in the Syrian Republic and its Outputs is an example of hijacking international human rights mechanism by tenuous political agendas. The countries sponsoring this draft resolution insist on using it as a means to spread their allegations on the situation in the Syrian Arab Republic. Mr. President, our national experience urges us to stress the importance of discussing the impacts of terrorism on human rights by the Council through a comprehensive approach based on guaranteeing the rights of the victims of terrorism. In line with its commitment under international law and in national laws, the Syrian Arab Republic has taken all necessary measures to protect its citizens from violations committed by terrorist armed groups and has restored security, stability, and the rule of law to the areas liberated from these groups. It has also strengthened means of support and protection to create an appropriate environment for the return of all Syrian internally and migrant refugees who have been displaced in order for them to return home safely in a dignified and voluntary manner. The catastrophe of the earthquake that struck Syria on the 6th of February has deepened the harsh conditions the country has been going through for 12 years. It added grave challenges and doubled the suffering of the Syrians. The Syrian government quickly launched an emergency response plan at the national level to address the repercussions of the disaster. It appealed to countries and international organizations to support the affected areas. The Syrian government affirmed its commitment and readiness to ensure that humanitarian aid reaches those who deserve it in all parts of the Syrian Arab Republic. It combined words with deeds through granting approvals and facilities to international organizations who are partners in the humanitarian work, including, as has become known to all, opening the borders across from the Turkish and the Syrian sides to areas controlled by armed groups. Syria expresses its gratitude and appreciation to the countries and organizations that showed solidarity and extended a helping hand to us. Unfortunately, the devastation resulted by the earthquake did not shake the consciousness of some countries and their leaders, who have always claimed humanity and who did not hesitate to politicize this natural disaster. These countries continued their policies based on politicization and double standards and turned a blind eye to the cries for help of the victims under the rubble and calls of their families under the severe shortage in rescue and relief equipment and materials caused by the unilateral coercive measures imposed on the Syrian people for a long time. This immoral, inhuman, and illegal blockade has caused enormous humanitarian suffering and has undermined the enjoyment of basic human rights, including the right of the Syrian people to live in decent living conditions, to enjoy their health and education and development in all forms. The unilateral coercive measures have also impeded providing the requirements of humanitarian operations and emergency response, which confirms that these measures are in fact nothing but a tool of collective punishment and killing, and they aren't less dangerous than the earthquake. We urge all states to discuss the human rights implications of these sanctions if the Council can go in that direction. Last October, the Special Rapporteur on the negative impact of the unilateral coercive measures on the enjoyment of human rights, Ms. Alena Duhan, visited Syria. During this visit, she examined some aspects of the catastrophic effects of the UCMs, that target Syrians in all areas of life. She concluded that these measures may amount to crimes against humanity. However, some member states sought to conceal the primary conclusions of the visit while promoting a politicized, biased, and false reports. Mr. President, Syria affirms that Item 7 of the Council's agenda is an essential item that addresses a unique and ongoing case of racial settlement colonialism. Syria stresses its inalienable right to fully restore the occupied Syrian Arab Golan and rejects any measures taken by the Israeli occupation to perpetuate its occupation, including the relentless settlement activities, which in their entirety constitute a violation of relevant United Nations resolutions, in particular Security Council Resolution 497 of 1981. Syria condemns the gross and systematic violations of human rights that Israeli occupation forces and settlers' gangs continue to commit in the occupied Syrian Golan and the occupied Palestinian territories. It renews its unwavering support for the right of the Palestinian people to establish their independent state and to guarantee the right of Palestinian refugees to return in implementation of relevant United Nations resolution. Syria supports the liberation of the remaining occupied territories. In conclusion, the Syrian Arab Republic renews its willingness to continue the collective work within the framework of the Council in order to enhance its role as an international mechanism for promoting universal respect for human rights on the basis of the principles of impartiality, objectivity, and non-politicization. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank His Excellency for the statement. And now I have the honor to give the floor to Her Excellency, Madame Isabelle Béraud Amadei, Councillor of Government and Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of Monaco. By video message.
Monsieur le Président du Conseil.
President of the Human Rights Council, High Commissioner, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. On the 10th of December 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted. And its preamble, it states that it is the common goal for all peoples and all nations to achieve. 75 years later, its universal implementation is not guaranteed. And today, more than ever, it shows that it is important to defend this common good. and the noble principles it promotes. In the crises that we see throughout the world, both the spirit and the letter of this fundamental text are flouted and trampled. All we need to do is look at Ukraine. The various reports that the High Commissioner has presented to this Council since the beginning of this conflict are edifying. There are situations of mass atrocities, shelling of civilian locations, rapes, murders, torture, forced deportation, arbitrary executions. These are acts that impact the human conscience and moral and must be condemned. We have a responsibility to provide facts and justice to the victims of these crimes. That is why my country supported the creation by this Council of an independent investigation commission, the work of which will be of crucial importance for fact-finding and establishment of responsibility. Amongst the great principles enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there is one that my country is particularly attached to, and that is non-discrimination, enshrined in Article 2. Discrimination, there are far too many women in the world who are victims of this discrimination, and so we are very, very far from achieving this important goal. This is the case of the situation of women in Afghanistan, which continues to deteriorate since the return of the Taliban. They are prohibited access to university, and they have already been deprived of access to secondary education. The High Commissioner very correctly noted that this is yet another cruel and inadmissible hit to the rights of women and Afghan girls. This is a blatant violation of Article 26 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which proclaims that higher education shall be equally accessible to all on the basis of merit. You must be assured that the Principality will continue to support, in the framework of this Council, initiatives condemning the situation and rectifying it. The brutal repression of peaceful demonstrations in Iran since September is yet another source of preoccupation for us, especially when it comes to the condemnation of numerous protesters to the death penalty. Such a punishment is not compatible with the right to life as enshrined in Article 3 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. For all of these reasons, the Principality of Monaco has supported the organization of an extraordinary session on the situation of human rights in Iran and co-sponsored the resolution establishing a fact-finding mission. We call on the Iranian authorities to fully cooperate with this mechanism, as well as with the Special Rapporteur. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, climate change, the depletion of biodiversity and ecosystems, as well as pollution, seriously impact the full enjoyment of the rights and freedoms in the Universal Declaration. These effects have been clearly registered, and no one can deny them. The interlinking between human rights and nature was one of the cornerstones of the Global Framework for Biodiversity of Kunming-Montreal, adopted in December. Monaco contributed to the development of this instrument, which promotes a human rights-based approach to protect the environment. It is therefore natural, in accordance with its long-standing commitment to protecting the environment, that Monaco promoted the recognition, both in the framework of this Council and at the General Assembly, of a right to a safe, clean, sustainable environment. I would like to commend the Special Rapporteur on the right to the environment for his personal commitment. This is Mr. David Boyd, who spared no efforts for these goals. For many years now, the Principality has supported this work, including through voluntary contributions. The quality and relevance of these reports prove that we have made the right choice, and so that is why this year we are reiterating our support. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, 3 years ago, the world was impacted by a global pandemic, which led to serious restrictions of our fundamental rights and freedoms. This unprecedented situation has had serious socioeconomic repercussions, and that we are still feeling now. The geopolitical events of this past year have proven that new threats have emerged, especially in terms of energy security and food security. In a number of countries, inflation has leapt. This economic context is particularly fragile and compromises the implementation of the right to a decent life, which is enshrined in Article 25 of the Universal Declaration. We must take the necessary measures to mitigate the combined effects of these crises, or our people's frustration will turn into despair and anger, and we can only imagine the consequences that may have. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, these examples show, if we needed that proof, that the ideas enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights are still fragile, and that it is of paramount importance to pursue these ideals. It's also a moral obligation. It is only in a collective manner and multilaterally that we can implement these goals. As Eleanor Roosevelt said, and we know her decisive role in the development and adoption of the Declaration, the structure of world peace cannot be the work of one man or one party or one nation. It must be a peace which rests on the cooperative effort of the whole world. This is our mission, and this is the mission of the Council. I thank you.
I thank Her Excellency for the statement, and now I have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Christian Timura, Minister of Human Rights and Citizenship and Relations with Institutions of Togo. By Excellency, you have the floor.
Monsieur le Président du Conseil.
President of the Human Rights Council, ladies and gentlemen, ministers, heads of delegation, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, allow me to address to you, Mr. President, my warmest congratulations on your election to the head of the Human Rights Council, as well as our wishes for every success in your work. I would also like to take this opportunity to transmit to you and through you to your entire team, as well as to all members of the Council, the greetings and encouragement from the President of the Togo Republic, His Excellency Mr. For Ezosimna Gnasingbe, for the quality and congratulations on the quality of the work that you have done in order to improve the situation of human rights in the world. I would like to assure you of the support and commitment of Togo in the pursuit, even as an observing state, of this work and the good work of the Council. President, ladies and gentlemen, the celebration this year, the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the 30th anniversary of the Declaration and Program of Action, the Vienna Program of Action, offer to the entire community of states an opportunity for introspection, which will enable us not just to hold a review that is both sincere and frank of our actions to improve human rights, but also encourages us to move forward with ambition and determination. I commend all of the relevant initiatives that are being taken here by the Human Rights Council, but also by the High Commissioner's Office for Human Rights, to make this occasion not just a celebration or commemoration, but a moment of review where we take account of our conscience and take pragmatic decisions. My country, Togo, would like to participate in this assessment and review of our ambitious perspectives. We've learned our lessons of the path we have taken, especially through the various challenges that we are facing in the implementation of our obligations in human rights in a multifaceted approach, taking into account their universality. My statement will also be focused on these challenges that we are facing and that at the national level we are responding to appropriately. First of all, I would like to mention the economic and financial situation in the world, which, with its consequences linked to price rises and rises in the price of living, directly impacts the social and economic rights of our populations. Togo is suffering from this global economic trend and is facing it with limited means, but with firm will and determination. Urgent measures evaluated at approximately 3% of national GDP have been taken in order to mitigate the effects of inflation on the everyday life of our population. We are referring to the rise in the indicative value of salaries and pensions for civil servants and the military and public sector workers, the revalorization of pensions for all civilians and military retirees in the public sector and the private sector, as well as monetary transfers for parents of students in order for them to purchase the required instruments for school. We've also supported the primary education and agriculture sectors. The impact of these measures is significant on the everyday life of our populations and has enabled us to protect the enjoyment of their fundamental rights, such as the rights to food, transport, and education. Secondly, we should also note that all of these actions to combat an expensive life have been implemented in a very difficult context linked to the COVID-19 pandemic, which is a challenge to human rights in the sense that it is constantly impacting our society, and this is ongoing. It has also led to more or less drastic restrictions and has also led to losses for our economy and has also caused bereavement for our families. In this difficult sanitary situation, the government has striven to avoid these measures taking on a general character and therefore compromising the enjoyment of fundamental liberties. The government has consistently monitored the proportionality, necessity, and adaptability of these measures. My country has more or less succeeded. We were congratulated by the international community for our rigorous, realistic, and proactive reaction, which enabled us to keep the mortality rate quite low. Today, based on the lessons we have learned from our management of the COVID-19 pandemic and the measures we took to react to it, the main challenge that the entire international community is facing now is the sustainable strengthening of public health systems. We must predict rather than react. In order to do so, we need a genuine international cooperation on healthcare. We should share our knowledge and expertise as well as strengthen our capacities and potential. COVID-19 revealed that our world is vulnerable and fully interdependent. We must take note of this reality and put it at the heart of our collective actions. President, ladies and gentlemen, the third challenge that is impacting us and is impacting our path towards the implementation of human rights is terrorism and violent extremism. These scourges, these threats that in Africa we did not know many years ago have become a sober reality that has impacted the Sahel region and continues to move towards coastal countries in West Africa, with many, many victims, displaced persons, and material damage as well in our regions. Terrorism is enemy number one of human rights. It is decimating families, displacing villages, closing schools, hospitals. It's ruining our youth. It is also damaging agriculture and creating sociopolitical instability. It is devastating for human rights. We are devoted to diplomatic traditions of inter-aid and of regional dialogues. The head of state made the choice to take charge of this phenomenon and strengthen stability and resilience in our states. These initiatives have been translated into inter alia, the Togo strategy for the Sahel region, and the creation of relevant mechanisms such as the Accra initiative. With repeated terrorist attacks and incursions in our territory, the Togolese government has mobilized significant military means, but also socioeconomic and financial funds in order to face this challenge. Inter alia, we would like to mention the emergency plan for the region, which aims to strengthen the resilience of populations of the relevant zones against jihadist rhetoric and actions. Nevertheless, we must note that these actions do not benefit from sincere international cooperation. Our discourse and our work in this room, the council room, in addition to the resolutions, must also take place on the ground with the same frank approach and determination in the respect of sovereignty, with coordinated actions between international partners in order to put an end to this violent cycle. Ladies and gentlemen, through the conclusions of our last review at the UPR in the 40th session in January-February 2022, Togo noted significant progress in the protection and promotion of human rights. We are referring to the strengthening of democratic institutions, the constitutionalization of the abolition of capital punishment, and imprisonment for eternity. This is also an issue. We've also taken significant reforms to protect women and young girls and prevent gender-based violence. This is the progress we have made. Moreover, Togo is also developing a draft law on the recognition and protection of human rights defenders. This text will define the legal framework enabling us to structure, organize, professionalize, and protect human rights defenders. We should consolidate these achievements. This is not possible unless we have international cooperation that is frank, sincere, respects the sovereign choices of all and the challenges we are facing. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Antony Blinken, Secretary of State of the United States of America, by video message.
Mr. Secretary General, High Commissioner Turk, President Balak, fellow members of the United Nations Human Rights Council, we are marking 75 years since the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. At its heart is a simple yet revolutionary idea. Human rights are universal. Or, as the drafters of the Declaration put it, human rights belong to all members of the human family. And these rights are indivisible, interdependent, and co-equal. These principles were not shaped by any one country, region, or ideology. They were discussed, debated, and meticulously drafted by experts from countries big and small, north and south, centuries old and newly independent. Each delegate brought to the collective enterprise ideas and perspectives that helped define the Declaration. Charles Malik, the delegate from Lebanon, argued that human rights must be defined in terms of the individual, not the nation, or any other group. Representing China, P.C. Chang suggested the entire framework should be built, in his words, with a view to elevating the concept of man's dignity. And dignity is the first principle in the first line of the Declaration. Hansa Mehta of India, one of 3 women delegates, together with Pakistan's Begum Ikramullah and America's Eleanor Roosevelt, insisted that rights be framed as belonging to all people, not just men. Indeed, the fact that the Declaration was forged and agreed upon by people representing nations with such diverse backgrounds, histories, and political systems is what gave it such unimpeachable legitimacy and moral force. That's still true today, even as some try to cast the Declaration's definition of human rights as reflecting the view of one region or ideology, or argue that different countries can have different conceptions of human rights, or to try to put the sovereignty of states ahead of the human rights of individuals. It's the responsibility of this Council and every UN member state to uphold the Declaration's universal vision and defend the human rights of everyone, everywhere. That includes protecting the human rights of our most vulnerable populations, a central tenet of the Vienna Declaration that we adopted 30 years ago. That's why the United States partners with countries from around the world to renew the mandate for the UN's independent expert on sexual orientation and gender identity, and why we made a voluntary contribution to support the vital work of the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent in countering anti-black discrimination, the only country to do so. Upholding the Declaration's vision also means continuing to advance economic, social, and cultural rights. The United States is committed to enabling people around the world to enjoy these rights. We invest more than any other country in the capacity of fellow member states to provide health care and food security for their populations. And last year, we joined 160 fellow member states in supporting a resolution that affirms the rights to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Fulfilling the Declaration's universal promise also means advancing human rights within our countries, something we sought to do in the United States, especially over the past 2 years. Since President Biden issued an open invitation in 2021 to all UN Special Procedures mandate holders, the United States has welcomed the Special Rapporteur on Minority Issues and the Independent Expert on Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity. And just a few weeks ago, the Special Rapporteur on the Promotion and Protection of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms while Countering Terrorism made the first ever visit by a UN mandate holder to the detention facility in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. We do this because we believe transparency and openness are not a threat to our sovereignty, but a way to make our government better at advancing the rights, the needs, the aspirations of the people we serve. We see our ability to accept critical feedback and to strive always to address enduring injustices and inequities as a sign of strength, not weakness. Holding ourselves to the same standards as we do every other government is particularly important at a time when human rights around the world are under assault, perhaps nowhere more than in Russia's brutal war on Ukraine. This Council has played a crucial role in shining a spotlight on Moscow's horrific and ongoing abuses, including through the creation of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine. The COI's first report in October concluded that Russia has committed war crimes and violations of international humanitarian law. As long as Russia continues to wage its war, the COI should continue to document such abuses, providing an impartial record of what's occurring, and a foundation for national and international efforts to hold perpetrators accountable. Governments that commit atrocities abroad are also likely to violate the rights of people at home, and that's exactly what Russia is doing. The Russian government now holds more than 500 political prisoners. In January, it shuttered the Moscow-Helsinki Group, one of the last human rights organizations still allowed to operate in the country. The government's systematic muzzling of independent voices in Russian civil society makes the work of the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the country even more important. The Iranian regime is also once again cracking down on citizens demanding their human rights and fundamental freedoms. Since the killing of Mahsa Amini in September brought Iranians of all ages out into the streets, the regime has killed at least 500 people, imprisoned tens of thousands more, many of whom have been tortured, according to human rights groups. In November, the Council came together to create an independent fact-finding mission to investigate Iran's human rights violations. We must ensure the team can do its work. We condemn the Taliban's draconian repression of women and girls in Afghanistan, including barring them from universities and secondary schools. The Taliban's recent edict prohibiting Afghan women from working for NGOs has closed off yet another pathway that should be open to them. And in a country where 29 million people depend on humanitarian aid for survival, the Taliban's decision will significantly reduce the amount of food, medicine, and other life-saving assistance reaching vulnerable people, especially women and girls. We remain gravely concerned about the ongoing genocide and crimes against humanity that China is committing against Muslim Uyghurs and other members of minority groups in Xinjiang. The report issued last year by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights affirmed serious abuses perpetrated by the PRC in Xinjiang, including the large-scale arbitrary deprivation of liberty of members of Uyghur and other predominantly Muslim communities, and credible allegations of torture and sexual and gender-based violence. Nearly a dozen years since launching its crackdown on Syrians demanding their human rights, the Assad regime continues to commit widespread abuses, which is why we urge Council members to renew the mandate of the country's Commission of Inquiry, even as we surge humanitarian assistance to help those in Syria and Turkey impacted by the devastating earthquake. On this Council, we have a responsibility to act in a way that's true to the spirit of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, including treating every country equally. That's why the United States continues to strongly oppose biased and disproportionate treatment of Israel, reflected in the Commission of Inquiry with no end date and standing Agenda Item 7. In the 75 years since the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted, there has rarely been a time when delivering on its commitments has been more urgent or more consequential to international peace and security, to development, to human dignity. The vision the drafters set out 75 years ago is as clear today as it was then. All members of the human family are entitled to human rights. Let us continue to strive to make those words real through the actions of the Human Rights Council, within our countries, and around the world.
I thank His Excellency for the statement, and now I have the honor to give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Nanaya Mahuta, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Local Government of New Zealand, by video message.
Kei ngā tōpito e whao te ao, kei ngā mana, kei ngā reo, he mihi mata kui kui ki a koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Mr. President, Secretary General, Excellencies, distinguished delegates and friends, greetings from Aotearoa, New Zealand. Today, I'm proud to reaffirm our strong and enduring commitment to universal human rights and the international human rights system. Human rights are universal values, values we all committed to 75 years ago, enduring values which, at its core, remind us of the inherent respect we must practice towards each other. It's critical that we work together to uphold these precepts for the people we represent. I want to start by acknowledging the people of Syria and Turkey and the devastating damage caused by recent earthquakes. Our thoughts are with the communities, families and loved ones affected, including refugees and internally displaced people. We acknowledge the international effort to rally and provide support in a significant time of need. Unfortunately, a country in crisis is not a rare occurrence in the 21st century. We've seen this in armed conflicts, widespread violence and situations of risk around the world. New Zealand has intimately experienced climate crisis and natural disasters, with Cyclone Gabrielle on our shores last week. When we declared a national state of emergency, we did so with the knowledge that we were experiencing an unprecedented weather event, one that has affected a third of our population and resulted in damage not seen for a generation. As we mark the one-year anniversary of Russia's illegal war against Ukraine, New Zealand continues to condemn Russia's actions, which have caused immense suffering. As I said in this forum last year, there is no victor in unjustified and unprovoked aggression. In Iran, the world has witnessed the further erosion of the rights of women and girls and violent repression of protest activity, including the execution of protesters. There's also been further deterioration of the rights of women and girls in Afghanistan, with the Taliban preventing girls from attending secondary school and preventing the employment of women working for NGOs. Ongoing violence perpetrated against civilians by Myanmar's military regime, including executions and bombings, are front of mind too. The findings by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights of serious human rights violations committed against the Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities in Xinjiang, China also remains of deep concern. Mr. President, we stand with the peoples of these nations to speak up and defend their rights. 75 years ago, we all came together to recognise the fundamental rights and the equal value of every person. The principle that human rights are universal and indivisible is just as important today as it was then. It is incumbent on all of us, every government, to do better to promote and protect human rights for all peoples. When marginalised groups have their rights realised, respected and fulfilled, our societies are stronger, safer, more prosperous. The world is facing multiple threats and challenges, As I've noted, we are seeing and feeling the impacts of climate change in our Pacific region. The scale of humanitarian crisis and human rights violations across the globe will continue to increase if we do not collectively fight climate change. We're also seeing a concerted effort to systematically wind back the rights of individuals who are members of vulnerable groups, including women and girls, the LGBTQIA+ community, Indigenous peoples and persons with disabilities. Individuals who sit at the intersection of these marginalised groups are particularly vulnerable, and so our responses must include dedicated resourcing to address multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination. Mr. President, it is now more important than ever to be unified. Kia kotahi tātou, let's unify. New Zealand is proud to continue to co-lead resolutions on the rights of persons with disabilities this year with Mexico, both in this Council and in the UN General Assembly. We will also lead a Council resolution on the prevention of maternal mortality and morbidity. These resolutions are a key indication of our international human rights priorities and our belief that the multilateral system is essential to promoting and protecting human rights across the globe. Embracing our diversity gives us strength as an international community. Let's continue to support that way forward. International human rights law embodies universal values, equality, respect, and accountability. They're fundamental to protecting the upholding of dignity of all people, both individually and collectively. After all, that is why we signed the Declaration of Human Rights all those years ago. Nō reira he eti taku eti I roto I te nākau whakapono. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Her Excellency for the statement. I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Urmas Reinsalu, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Estonia, by video message.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, 1 year ago, a vicious full-scale war of aggression was unleashed by Russia against Ukraine. Let's be clear, this is the war of conquest. Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea, as well as Donetsk, Kherson, Lugansk and Zaporizhia regions of Ukraine, is an attempt to establish a new colonial power in the region. This is a grave violation of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. This is a grave violation of international law and the UN Charter. In the past year, we have seen killings of civilians, tortures, ill treatment and gender-based violence in Ukraine, including rapes as a tactic of war. More than 5 million people are displaced within Ukraine, and 40% of the Ukrainian population are in need of humanitarian aid because they lack access to electricity, heating or running water. Over 2 million Ukrainians, including hundreds of thousands of children, have been systematically put through filtration camps and illegally deported to Russia, many of them separated from parents and forcefully adopted. Russia's heinous actions do not only harm Ukraine, but all of us. The global food security has been weaponized by Russia, threatening to leave millions of people across the globe at the risk of starvation. The blockade of Ukrainian exports, continuing impediments to the Black Sea Grain Initiative, shelling of major ports and grain storages. All this shows that Russia is ready to go as far as it can get to achieve its political ambitions. This is why the Russian war against Ukraine is not a European war or local crisis. Imperialistic ambitions have no mercy and no limits. Russia has violated human rights and international humanitarian law. It has committed atrocity crimes in Ukraine and must be held to account. Our way ahead is simple. We have to fight against impunity and ensure proper investigation, trial and prosecution of crimes committed by Russia on Ukrainian soil. We have to redouble our efforts to bring perpetrators before the International Criminal Court. And we should also support Ukraine in establishing a special international tribunal with cross-regional support for the crime of aggression. Mr. President, Last year, we have seen a steady decline in human rights in various parts of the world. The grave human rights violations and abuses against women and girls in Afghanistan aim to gradually erase them from public life, deprive of education and opportunities. Together, we must put pressure on Taliban to protect women and girls from all forms of violence and guarantee their full, equal and meaningful participation in all spheres of life. In Belarus, crackdowns on the opposition leaders, journalists and media workers continue, as well as unprecedented brutality and mass violence. We urge the Belarusian authorities to release immediately and unconditionally all arbitrarily detained persons, including political prisoners, journalists and media workers. We strongly condemn Belarus' illegal involvement in Russia's unprovoked and unjustified military aggression against Ukraine. In Iran, brave citizens, especially women and girls, have been out in the streets for months demanding their human rights. We urge Iranian authorities to immediately release the thousands of persons arrested for exercising the right to peacefully protest. Iran must also cease all executions. Estonia strongly opposes the use of the death penalty at all times and in all circumstances. Mr. President, today I would like also to stress the importance of guaranteeing the rights of children, both online and offline. Rights of the child are high among our priorities, and Estonia pays special attention to the children in vulnerable situations. We should remember to protect our children online by encouraging digital literacy and developing tools to fight child exploitation. Digital technology should advance human rights and not to hinder them. But all of it starts from education. To this day, more than 200 million children are deprived of education and hundreds of millions lack basic literacy skills. We should do all we can to support free and universal access to quality education in all parts of the world, including digital learning. We should aim for closing the various digital gaps, including the digital gender gap, and foster access to digital information and media education. Mr. President, this year we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is an important milestone in the history of universal rights and freedoms, guarded by an objective mechanism of universal periodic review. The UPR reminds us that each country is capable of real and positive changes. It also reminds that each one of us has to work hard and uphold the universal standards of human rights. I'm hopeful that years later we are going to celebrate the world where more of us can enjoy peace and universal human rights they all deserve. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency for the statement. And now I have the honor to give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Kitlan Kabua, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade of the Marshall Islands. Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, Yago Maulip. Mr. President, let me start by extending my condolences to the victims of the devastating earthquake in Turkey and Syria. These dramatic events remind us of our own vulnerabilities to sudden onset disasters. Mr. President, I would like to congratulate you on your election as the President of the Human Rights Council. We trust that you will lead this council with diligence and wisdom as it continues its important work. We also take this opportunity to commend His Excellency Ambassador Federico Villegas for his able leadership of this council last year. Mr. President, the value of dialogue on human rights is very much needed in these days, as reflected in the robust program of work before this council. It is fair to say that this council has an immense task ahead, and the Republic of the Marshall Islands stands ready to support this council. It was only a few months ago, in September 2022, that the Marshall Islands, in partnership with Fiji, Nauru, Samoa, and Vanuatu, as a core group, presented a resolution of immense importance to the Marshallese people. The resolution, presented at the 51st session of the Human Rights Council and adopted by consensus, spoke to the nuclear legacy of the Marshall Islands, a legacy that we did not want, a legacy that we have had to bear, and a legacy that we continue to struggle with. For the Marshallese people, the nuclear legacy is both a historical injustice and current reality. From an historical perspective, while under UN trusteeship, our human rights were violated. We were exposed to nuclear radiation, we were studied, we were tested, and documented. Today, the truth remains elusive. We will continue to pursue the truth, and we will continue to demand answers, as we have the right to know what was done, how it was done, to what extent the damage was caused, and most importantly, how we can address these and move forward. To quote the late Tony de, a former foreign minister of the Marshall Islands and champion of our pursuit of nuclear justice, there will be no closure without full disclosure. Before the Nuclear Legacy Resolution in 2021, the Marshall Islands, in partnership with the Bahamas, with the European Union, Fiji, Panama, Paraguay, and Sudan, presented a resolution to establish the Special Procedure Mandate on climate change. Climate change is a major threat to the Marshall Islands and our people. We are experiencing an increase in the frequency and intensity of natural disasters. Accordingly, climate change will remain a high priority for the Marshallese government, and during our term of Council membership, we were determined to explore avenues to address its human rights implications. We are proud to see progress already being made through the reports presented by the Special Rapporteur and the dialogues held. As a low-lying atoll nation, climate change is the greatest threat to our human rights. It has been widely recognized that climate change poses a serious and imminent existential threat to coastal communities due to rising sea levels. In the Marshall Islands, all communities are coastal communities, and all people are coastal people. We are all at risk, and we understand the very real existential threat that climate change poses to us and our islands. The Marshall Islands membership of the Human Rights Council ended in 2022, and we are putting forward our new candidature for the term 2025 to 2027. In putting this forward, we would hope that our record as former members will be considered positively in the assessment of our candidacy. During our membership on the Council, we strove to be engaging, to take principled positions, and to be firm on our values. As reflected in the resolutions that we pursued, we also sought to explore ways in which the Council can assist in addressing the real human rights challenges that are faced by the Marshallese people. Challenges that are context-specific, yet would resonate with others that are familiar with our struggles, with our own nuclear legacies, climate change vulnerabilities, or other human rights challenges unique to their situations. Certainly, there were many instances where we were told that our concerns and priorities were not orthodox matters that came before the Human Rights Council, and in a few cases, we were told that the Council is the wrong forum. To that we have answered, if we cannot bring our human right plights to the Human Rights Council, then where else should they go? If this Council is to be representative, and if it is truly to aspire to the universality of human rights, it must be ready and willing to address the human rights challenges faced by all persons in all states, even ones as small as the Marshall Islands. In a similar vein, small states must be willing to take up their plights to this Council and compel it to listen and to take action. Mr. President, yesterday, March 1st, was Nuclear Victims Remembrance Day in the Marshall Islands. It is a somber national holiday to commemorate the anniversary of Castle Bravo nuclear weapons test on Bikini Atoll that took place March 1st, 1954. In total, 67 known nuclear weapons tests were conducted in the Marshall Islands between the years 1946 and 1958. Here in Geneva, our permanent mission is hosting a two-day exhibit at the Musée d'Ethnographie de Genève in conjunction with its council session to share more information and to spread awareness about our nuclear legacy. This exhibit, which closes today, comes on the heels of the adoption of Resolution 51-35, as presented by our core group comprised of Pacific SIDS missions based here in Geneva, namely Fiji, Nauru, Samoa, Vanuatu, and my own country, the Marshall Islands. I invite you, Mr. President, and all delegations to attend. I wish you all a successful 50-second session. Komoltada, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Alatoy Ismail Kalasaku, Prime Minister of Vanuatu, by video message.
Dear Mr. President of the Human Rights Council, Honorable Presidents and Prime Ministers, Ministers, United Nations High Commissioners for Human Rights, ladies and gentlemen, this year, 2023, marks the 75th year which draws together members of the global family, proclaiming the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We recall that the declaration came about after the ravages of the terrible wars at that time, and the world was resolute to ensure that peace and rights are advanced. Tyranny and excesses of some individuals and states against fellow human beings must not continue to plague our communities. The ability of human beings and nations to unleash their destruction and disrespect to humanity must be discouraged, and we must reaffirm the promise in the Universal Human Rights Declaration to not allow this to reoccur. And so, we celebrate together our commitment to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in its 75th year, but we must remain vigilant and remind ourselves that much more can be done. Mr. President, Vanuatu remains firm and resolute to recognize the inherent dignity and of equal and inalienable rights of all of us, the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace. In so doing, as Vanuatu commits and affirm our faith in fundamental human rights, we are cognizant of the dignity and worth of each person and equal rights for all. But 75 years after our Universal Declaration of Human Rights, ironically, many aspects of our world and behavior remain the same. We observe the continuance of preying on the weak and the poor, and on communities who are experiencing the domination and indignity of colonization, and peoples and individuals suffering grave violations of human rights due to natural resource extraction and profit-driven environmental destruction. It is unfortunate that despite a common resolve, a disjointed consideration of rights seems evident. Mr. President, I draw particular attention to human rights impacted by climate change. The ravaging effects of global warming have become existential for Vanuatu and for many peoples across the planet. As economies are ravaged, livelihoods decimated, and lives lost, it is clear that the climate crisis is a human rights crisis. I am encouraged by the recent UN COP27 cover decision, which stipulates that states should, when taking action to address climate change, respect, promote, and consider their respective obligations on human rights. But what are our human rights and climate change obligations? Today, states continue through their acts and omissions to cause significant harm to the climate system and other parts of the environment. Vanuatu sees past and present greenhouse gas emissions as a breach of the rule of existing international law which regulates the conduct of states in relation to activities that contribute to climate change and its adverse effects. From the smallest village to the global stage, the rule of law is all that stands between peace and stability, climate resilience and catastrophe. In support of a rules-based international order, Vanuatu will ask the United Nations International Court of Justice to review international law having particular regard to the Charter of the United Nations, that international covenants on civic and political rights and on economic, social and cultural rights and other international legal instruments and principles, to answer a simple question: what are the legal consequences for states when they have caused significant harm to the climate system and other parts of the environment with respect to peoples and individuals of the present and future generations? As the United Nations principal legal organ, the International Court of Justice can provide this clarity as a key part of its mandate and provide us all with a non-contentious advisory opinion on what international law already says on what states must do and not do to prevent significant harm to the climate and people. An ICJ advisory opinion will clarify our collective obligations under a range of international instruments well beyond the Paris Agreement, so that we can all do more to protect the rights of humanity. Called for by youth in the Pacific Islands and young people across the globe, and with support from nations of the global North and of the global South, it is time for the United Nations International Court of Justice to provide guidance on the legal links between climate and human rights obligations. Vanuatu acknowledges you all and the High Commissioner drawing attention to ensuring that climate change issues are mainstreamed into human rights conversations. And so, Mr. President, today I strongly call on all United Nations members to join Vanuatu and others to adopt in the incoming weeks a United Nations General Assembly resolution for an advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice on the obligations of states in respect of climate change and human rights. Your collective support is called for in the resolution, which is on the right side of history. 75 years since the Declaration of Universal Human Rights, we must stay true to our collective commitment to defend human rights, champion the rule of international law, and demonstrate action on climate change. This is our moment of moral clarity, nations having freedom, assured that our rights, our human rights to existence, now threatened by climate change, are not eroded and taken away from our future generations. I thank you all, and may God bless you.
I thank His Excellency for the statement. I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Gordan Grlic Radman, Minister of Foreign Affairs and European Affairs of Croatia, by video message.
Mr. President, Mr. High Commissioner, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to use this opportunity to express my congratulations to the President of the Council, distinguished Ambassador Václav Balek. I wish him a successful guidance of the Council. I would also like to commend the work of the newly appointed High Commissioner for Human Rights, Mr. Volker Türk, and his office in these challenging times. Mr. President, I have the honor to address this distinguished body in 2023, the year that marks important anniversaries of Universal Declaration for Human Rights, Vienna Declaration, and the ICC Rome Statute. These documents continue to guide us and remind us that all human rights, civil and political, economic, social and cultural, are universal and integral. In 2022, we witnessed devastating events we thought are not longer possible. Contrary to the UN Charter and stomping on the rules-based international order, the unprovoked armed attack of the Russian Federation on Ukraine shocked the world. This attack on Ukraine in 2022 caused severe human rights and humanitarian law violations, exposing millions of innocent civilians to suffering and causing a global food and energy crisis. The Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine concluded that war crimes have been committed. Therefore, the international community should do its part in ensuring the accountability for the committed crimes. Mr. President, Croatia empathizes and renders its full support to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. Having experienced military aggression against our country and the consequences of the war, we fully sympathize with victims of armed conflicts around the world and their families. 3 decades after the Homeland War, Croatia is still searching for 1,816 missing persons. Solving their fate would significantly contribute to the bilateral relations of the affected countries and build a bridge towards a lasting reconciliation. Having in mind the victims of enforced disappearances, both nationally and around the world, Croatia pays special attention to the issue of missing persons and the related question of casualty recording. Therefore, we join forces with our partners in presenting the first resolution on casualty recording and human rights adopted by consensus in the Council last year. We are looking forward to the report and the related Council debate in June. Mr. President, today's global challenges requires increasingly intensive multilateral action and international cooperation, especially in the international human rights fora. We have many effective mechanisms of the Council that Croatia fully supports. We must preserve their independence. Special sessions, urgent debates, the Universal Periodic Review, special procedures, and treaty bodies all offer different tools for human rights monitoring. In that context, I am pleased to confirm that in the course of this year, Croatia plans to present its midterm UPR report reflecting on recommendations received during the third UPR cycle. Mr. President, numerous conflicts around the world show how fragile the existing mechanism for the protection of human rights can be. In 2022, women's rights have been under attack. Peaceful protesters have been arbitrarily detained, while the independent media and NGOs have been shut down. And in that regard, the situation is particularly grave in Russia and Belarus. While we discuss strengthening women's and girls' rights in this distinguished body, women in Afghanistan cannot participate in public life or merely have a right education. On the other side, we witnessed the death of a young Iranian woman whose only wrongdoing was her desire to exercise her civil and political rights. Mr. President, Our long-standing priorities remain promotion of gender equality, women empowerment, and eradicating gender-based violence. We continue advocating for the protection of groups in vulnerable situations, including children, people with disabilities, and national minorities. The worldwide abolition of the death penalty remains high on our agenda. We welcome the growing international consensus for its abolition. Croatia continues promoting the freedom of religion or belief in all its aspects. Together with partners, Croatia has been leading for years the resolution on conscientious objection to military service. We invite all stakeholders to contribute with their experience at the related OHCHR workshop later this year. The impact of new digital technologies on human rights also deserves our common focus. Croatia will promote a human rights-based approach in their development and use, including with regard to artificial intelligence. Mr. President, Croatia remains committed to combating hate speech both online and offline, including by combating anti-Semitism. This week, Croatia is taking over the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance presidency. We will use it to promote Holocaust education, remembrance and research in our quest to protect the fact and counter Holocaust denial and distortion. As an important step, our government recently adopted the IRA's working definitions of anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial and distortion, as well as a definition of anti-Roma discrimination. Let me conclude by reiterating our strong commitment of my country to universal respect of the full implementation of all human rights. Croatia will continue playing an active role both nationally and the multilateral arena in the promotion and protection of human rights. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency for the statement. I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Antony J, Special Advisor to the Prime Minister of Japan. Excellency, you have the floor.
Let me begin by congratulating you, Ambassador Balek, on assuming the role of President of this body. I look forward to seeing the Human Rights Council effectively addressing international human rights issues under your presidency this year. I would also like to pay tribute to the energetic work of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Mr. Volker Turk, who took office last September. Japan will cooperate closely with the Office of the High Commissioner and continue to contribute to international efforts to protect and promote human rights. Mr. President, it was just after the beginning of Russia's aggression against Ukraine when I stood before this council last year. I regret that I am once again obliged to refer to this situation after more than a year has passed. Japan firmly rejects Russia's outrageous act that shakes the very foundation of the international order, and we will continue to strongly support Ukraine. We will never tolerate unilateral attempts to change the status quo by force in any region. The international community must unite once again to send a clear message and take action in order to defend the free and open international order based on the rule of law. At the same time, we must not forget to keep in mind the human rights situation of each person in the world who is currently facing severe difficulties, including those in Turkey and Syria who have been hit hard by the earthquake. Japan, which has itself experienced numerous major natural disasters, including the Great East Japan earthquake in 2011, is providing maximum support to the people of Turkey and Syria who have been suffering greatly in the aftermath of the earthquake. Japan has already dispatched Japan disaster relief teams and provided emergency relief goods and decided to provide emergency humanitarian assistance of approximately $27 million, including through international organizations and Japanese NGOs. We will continue to implement humanitarian assistance to meet the needs of those affected by the disaster and support Turkey and Syria's efforts towards recovery. Mr. Vice President, the protection of human rights is the basic responsibility of all nations. It is therefore important for the international community to continue dialogue and cooperation toward ensuring we fulfill this responsibility. Japan has been conducting human rights dialogue with various countries and supporting the protection of human rights in Ukraine, Sri Lanka, and other countries through contributions to OHCHR. Japan has also drafted resolutions on human rights situation in Cambodia that support Cambodia's own efforts in this area. These resolutions reflect the voices of the international community and have all been adopted by consensus. At the same time, Japan continues to speaking out firmly against serious human rights violations. Japan is concerned that no action has been taken to improve the situation in Myanmar. We will continue to work closely with the international community, including ASEAN, and make every effort to improve the situation in Myanmar. The freedom, respect for human rights, and the rule of law must also be protected in China, including in Hong Kong and Xinjiang. Last September, OHCHR published its assessment of human rights concerns in Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, People's Republic of China. Japan is deeply concerned about the human rights situation in China and again strongly urges China to take positive, concrete actions to address this situation. The issue of abductions by North Korea is a serious humanitarian issue with time constraints. As the families of the victims continue to age, there is no time to lose on this issue. The resolutions on the situation of human rights in the DPRK demonstrate the international community's strong concerns about the serious human rights violations in North Korea, including the issue of abductions. Japan, in close cooperation with the international community, we will continue to strongly urge North Korea to take concrete and positive actions toward the immediate resolution of the abductions issue. Mr. Vice President, Japan is making tireless efforts domestically as well. Last September, for the first time in Asia, we published the guidelines on respecting human rights in responsible supply chains that I introduced to this Council last year. Japan is discussing initiatives to promote respect for human rights in government procurement, and I'm aiming at their early introduction as well. We also held forums and seminars in Thailand and Bangladesh with the cooperation of UNDP and ILO. Japan has contributed $40 million to UNDP and other organizations to support the introduction of human rights due diligence by Japanese companies and their business partners operating around the world, as well as the improvement of related systems in developing countries. To promote women's economic empowerment, as of July last year, Japan has required employers above a certain size to disclose the gender pay gap within their organizations. In December, Japan hosted the World Assembly for Women, WOW 2022, with the aim of sharing the initiatives and good practices of each country toward achieving gender equality and women's empowerment. This fiscal year, Japan contributed approximately $21 million to UN Women to support its work in this area. Unjust discrimination and prejudice based on sexual orientation and gender identity should never be tolerated. Japan will realize a society where diversity is respected and all people value each other's human rights and individual dignity, and where people can live their lives on their own terms. In this connection, Japan will continue to support activities of the Special Rapporteur on the elimination of discrimination against persons affected by leprosy. Mr. Vice President, Japan has been addressing the discharge of Alps treated water at TEPCO's Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station with the highest priority on safety in accordance with domestic and international safety standards, which is also vital for the revitalization of Fukushima. The discharge will not be allowed in a manner that endangers human health and the marine environment. Mr. Vice President, this year marks the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Japan, as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council and a holder of the G7 presidency, is determined to defend the international order based on the rule of law. Improvement of the global human rights situation cannot be achieved overnight. Conscious that much still needs to be done, Japan is running for election to the Human Rights Council this year to continue playing a leading role in the protection and promotion of international and domestic human rights. We would greatly appreciate the valuable support of many countries for this endeavor. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Excellency. I now have the honor to give the floor Nundumbaro, Minister of Constitutional and Legal Affairs of the Republic of Tanzania, by video message.
Mr. President, Honorable Excellencies and delegates, I extend greetings from the government and the people of the United Republic of Tanzania. I also convey warm regards from Our Excellency, the President of the United Republic of Tanzania, Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan, who continues to prioritize the promotion and the protection of human rights in the government development agenda. The government of the United Republic of Tanzania believes that any successful nation is built on national foundation that includes self-governance, unity, patriotism, integrity and responsibility, rule of law, justice and performance. These important words are enshrined in the Constitution of the United Republic of Tanzania, and such attributes can be achieved through promotion and protection of human rights, centered on the basic human rights principle of equality and non-discrimination. Indeed, the current governance model is anchored on 4 pillars, being reconciliation, resilience, reforms, and rebuilding. These are the ultimate outcome of the principles of participation, as central to attaining the 4 R's is dialogue, consultation, and amicable exchange of views and ideas in order to reach feasible solutions that promote and protect human rights. President, this inclusive approach is proving fruitful in the realization of human rights in the United Republic of Tanzania. This has been Her Excellency the President's approach in supporting realization of the right to freedom of association and the right to participate in political affairs. As a result, Her Excellency the President has personally spearheaded discussion with political parties. The government has followed their lead and held discussion with key stakeholders championing good governance, democracy, and the rule of law. This has been the approach in promoting the right to freedom of expression and access to information. Dialogue between media houses and the sector ministry resulted in the reopening of closed media houses, re-registering of newspapers, and a reopening of closed online TV on the condition that the laws of the land will be complied with. Further, the Media Services Act of 2016 is being reviewed to ensure this fundamental right central to any true democracy is being realized. As a result, media pluralism continues to flourish in Tanzania, and there are 257 licensed newspapers and magazines, 210 radio stations, 56 television stations, 24 online radios, 663 online TV, 63 online blogs, 144 web blogs, and 10 online forums. The judiciary of Tanzania is playing a significant role in ensuring access to justice and bringing its service closer to the people. The judiciary has constructed 6 integrated judicial centers, which is a system where all courts in the chain of justice are found in one building, from primary court to the Court of Appeal. The judiciary is also piloting 2 mobile courts which have the jurisdiction of a district court and adjudicate civil matters, thus bringing justice service closer to the people. The government also launched a nationwide legal aid awareness campaign this month called Mama Samia Legal Aid Campaign, in honor of Her Excellency the President, to ensure that indigents and especially the vulnerable groups of women and children have support when they come in contact with the law. We believe that consultation and engagement with state and non-state actors is key when promoting and protecting human rights. The government has continued implementing its free education policy to ensure access to education, and the monthly education budget was increased from 20.8 billion Tanzanian shillings to 26 billion Tanzanian shillings per month. Access to higher education is being enhanced by increasing loan funds for students, where in the year 2021-22, a total of 570 billion shillings have been used compared to 464 billion in previous year. Likewise, the number of beneficiaries has increased from 149,398 in 2021 to 177,650,000 students in the current year. Further, a population and housing census was held in August 2022, and the results were officially launched in October 2022, revealing the United Republic of Tanzania has a population of 61,741,120 people, with 59,851,347 people are in mainland Tanzania, and 1,889,773 are in Zanzibar. Also, that females are 31,687,990 and males are 30,053,130. Reflects an expansion of 16 million in a decade thereafter. The results of the population census will assist the government in establishing development projects aligned with sustainable goals and ensure that no one is left behind in the development agenda. President, I conclude by assuring you of my delegation's full support as you steer this august body. I also wish all fruitful deliberation, as the work of the Human Rights Council is certainly poignant and significant impacts peace and stability by urging both state and non-state actors to ensure realization of human rights at a global level. I thank you very much.
I thank His Excellency for the statement. I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Dmytro Kuleba, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kyrgyzstan. Excellency, you have the floor.
Good morning. Dear President Mr. Balek, dear High Commissioner Mr. Turk, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor for me and very symbolic to address the Human Rights Council on exactly the same day when 31 years ago Kyrgyzstan joined UN family. If you would allow me, I'd like to continue my speech in
Let me extend my sincere and deep condolences to Turkey and Syria on tens of thousands of victims of recent earthquakes. I am honored to address the Human Rights Council in the light of Kyrgyzstan's first-year membership in the UN body that represents a unique platform for discussing and formulating recommendations in the field of human rights. As it was said here today, this year we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Over these 75 years, the significant progress has been achieved in the development of humankind. These achievements are inseparably connected with the acknowledgement of human rights on individual, community, and global levels. To promote and protect human rights, a system of internationally recognized norms and principles has been established, which includes 9 core international human rights treaties and mechanisms for their effective monitoring. However, much of the potential of human rights field remains largely unrealized. It is very relevant amid increasingly growing global challenges related to inequality, discrimination, hate speech, misinformation, instability, and conflicts. Today, the world is facing serious tests. Our problems are interconnected and affect everyone regardless of borders. These problems can be solved only if we act together and demonstrate common solidarity in achieving goals for the well-being of humanity. The realization of human rights is based on national responsibility with connection to the global context. It requires broad and sustained engagement with states, civil society, and other stakeholders, and inseparably linked with the 2030 Agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, Kyrgyzstan is fully committed to the goals and principles enshrined in UN Charter and Universal Declaration of Human Rights, supports the universality of human rights and their application on equal, non-discriminatory and non-selective basis. To date, Kyrgyzstan is a party to 8 of the 9 core universal human rights treaties. We enjoy constructive cooperation with the UN special procedures. In the year 2020, we extended a standing invitation to all thematic special mandate holders. We consider the Universal Periodic Review as an important mechanism for effective assessment and monitoring of human rights situation in the UN member states. Kyrgyzstan has been twice a member of the Human Rights Council, and based on its previous experience, is committed to continue making its visible contribution to the work of this important and influential UN body. As the Human Rights Council member, Kyrgyzstan is committed to fulfill its international obligations and intends to make every effort to protect and promote human rights and fundamental freedoms, the rule of law, and democracy at both the national and international levels. Actively participate in strengthening the role of Council in improving international cooperation to achieve universal respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. Contribute at the international level to the promotion of rights of women and children, migrant workers, and people with disabilities, and dialogue to advance the fight against discrimination, xenophobia, and intolerance. Speaking about the achievements of my country, I would like to underline that Kyrgyzstan continues to build a strong democratic form of government, strengthen the rule of law, bring national legislation into line with the applicable norms of international law, reform the judicial and law enforcement systems, improve the electoral system. Since 2021, Kyrgyzstan has been carrying out the large-scale inventory of the national legislation, the humanization of criminal law, the mid-term programs in such priority areas as family and children protection, gender equality, anti-corruption, modernizations of the penal system. In addition, a new National Plan of Action for Human Rights for 2022-24, based on the recommendations of the third cycle of the Universal Periodic Review, treaty bodies and special procedures of the Council, is being currently implemented. All the necessary conditions have been established in Kyrgyzstan for further development of civil society. There are more than 6,000 active independent non-governmental organizations, human rights activists, the Ombudsman, the National Center for the Prevention of Torture, and numerous international agencies. The OHSCHR Regional Office for Central Asia is located in Kyrgyzstan. Human rights is the central pillar of the 2030 Agenda. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals are based on economic, civil, cultural, political, social rights and the right to development. As the UN Secretary General emphasized in his recent speech, the right to development goes hand in hand with the right to a clean and healthy, sustainable environment. To fully realize this right, developing countries need adequate funding for their national efforts. In the wake of severe impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the global economy and amid geopolitical tensions in the world, the external debt of developing countries has become one of the most critical issues. We share the view of the Secretary General that the external debts of developing countries are increasing, depriving them of the ability to achieve development through external borrowing, thereby hampering the full development of human rights. We support his call for a radical transformation of the global financial architecture in order to eliminate inequality and injustice and achieve the sustainable development goals on time. Given this, the President Sadir Japarov of Kyrgyzstan called on international development partners to strengthen efforts to exchange the country's external debt for environmental protection projects, in particular for the implementation of initiatives in the field of climate change and green economy. In this context, Kyrgyzstan asks donor countries, international financial institutions, and organizations to integrate this principle into their programs and projects as much as possible, thus encouraging the further development of human rights in developing countries. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I would like to emphasize that Kyrgyzstan is fully committed to further strengthening its credibility as a country that respects and protects human rights. Kyrgyzstan, whose domestic public policy is fundamentally linked to the protection of human rights, and which has experience as a member of the Council, intends to participate effectively in the decision-making process and to contribute to the constructive dialogue in the Council in the name of dignity, freedom, and justice for all. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. A.K. Abdul Momen, MP, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Bangladesh, by video message.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Mr. President, let me begin by congratulating you on your election as the President of the Council. I assure you that my delegation's full cooperation in discharging your duties. Ladies and gentlemen, Bangladesh was born out of a long struggle against injustice, misrule, discrimination, and oppression. Our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, envisioned a country that would uphold the principles of equality, inclusivity, democracy, and human rights and dignity, and justice. Taking inspiration from his ideals, we strive to maintain a strong focus on human rights and fundamental freedoms and mainstreaming human rights in our national discourse through participatory democracy, independent judiciary, free media, and a vibrant civil society. Under the prudent leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, the government of Bangladesh is relentlessly working to uphold human rights and fundamental freedoms of everyone, our citizens, especially the vulnerable ones, including women, children, religious and ethnic minorities, persons with disabilities, and people living in extreme poverty. We remain committed to combating poverty, deprivation, and social exclusion that violate human rights and dignity and create barriers to full enjoyment of human rights and social justice. We believe right to development, right to food, right to shelter, clothes, education, and healthcare are human rights. Therefore, we are working hard to ensure they are above to our citizens. Mr. President, as a member of the Human Rights Council, we reaffirm our commitment to his works for the promotion and protection of human rights globally. We underline the principles of universality, impartiality, objectivity, and non-selectivity in the Council's work. Bangladesh has remained constructively engaged with human rights bodies and mechanisms. Last year, we hosted former High Commissioner for Human Rights, Madam Michelle Bachelet. Moreover, in last 1 year, we welcome visits of 5 special procedural mandate holders in Bangladesh. A few more will visit in the forthcoming year. Bangladesh's initial report under the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities was considered last year. We engage ourselves and various special mandate holders and human rights mechanisms and respond to their queries. All these speak for not only our commitment, but also our openness before the international community with regard to the practice of human rights in the country. We firmly believe that the Universal Periodic Review of the Human Rights Council is an effective mechanism for promotion and protection of human rights. Bangladesh will be undergoing its 4th UPR later this year, and will seek constructive engagement of the member states. Ladies and gentlemen, our steadfast commitment to human rights and respect for human dignity led us to provide shelter to over 1 million forcibly displaced, persecuted Rohingyas. By doing so, we saved thousands of lives, despite numerous challenges, including
increasing tendency of criminal activities on the part of some of them, we continue to host these persecuted people and ensure their safety and security. More than 5 years have passed, but the prospect of their return remains bleak as Myanmar continues to evade concrete actions to address the root causes and create an enabling environment. Global efforts have up till now remained inadequate to force Myanmar to make any positive shift in their mindset, in their policy and approach towards the Rohingyas. We are alarmed as the World Food Programme has decided to reduce assistance to the camp dwellers for inadequate and ever-decreasing international financial support. We are aware that the international community has been emphasizing Myanmar's return to democracy since the military takeover 2 years back. However, that should not divert its attention from the misery of the Rohingyas, the return to their homeland with safety and dignity, and basic rights as part of durable solutions. The Rohingyas also deserve justice for the atrocity crimes they endured. We call on the international community to mount pressure on Myanmar so that it is obliged to fully comply with the ICJ order, cooperate with all human rights and international judicial mechanisms, create conducive environment in Rakhine, and commence repatriation immediately. Mr. President, I would like to quickly touch upon some global issues that need the Council attention. The COVID-19 pandemic, followed by food, fuel, finance crises created due to the ongoing war in Europe due to sanctions and counter-sanctions, have exaggerated pre-existing vulnerabilities in many societies, particularly in the developing and least developed countries, and accentuating poverty, underdevelopment, and depriving many of them from the enjoyment of the basic rights. Climate change is one of the greatest threats to the human rights of us and the succeeding generations. The cost of climate change is too high for countries that are the least contributor to it. Unfortunately, progress on the discussion on loss and damage and climate justice remains very slow and at times elusive. We would like to see that the Council articulates a strong message on addressing the root causes of climate change and accelerating global climate action to save lives and livelihoods and promote climate justice. Each year, nearly 650,000 residents of our coastal areas are being uprooted from their homes and their traditional jobs due to erratic climatic changes, and their right to have a decent living must be ensured. I would also like to highlight that migrants continue to face racism, discrimination, and stigmatization despite their significant contribution to the destination countries. Migrants have been disproportionately impacted due to job losses, salary cuts, discriminatory dismissals, withholding of benefits, and forced return during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Council should pay adequate attention to protection and promotion of the rights of migrants irrespective of their status. Excellencies, many of our countries are highly vulnerable to external economic and environmental shocks as they are plagued by growing poverty, hunger and malnutrition, inequality, digital divides, complex humanitarian emergencies, lack of institutional capacity, environmental degradation, climate change and disasters. For the millions of girls, boys, women and men living in these countries, development, the Declaration on the Right to Development that articulated development as, and I quote, a comprehensive economic, social, cultural and political process which aims at the constant improvement of the well-being of the entire population, unquote. We must be able to imbibe the spirit and recognize right to development as an inalienable human right which essentially entitles every human person to enjoy economic, social, cultural and political development. States have obligations to collectively forge partnerships at global and regional levels to implement the right to development. I ask this solemn council to crystallize aspects under the right to development and realize them in letter and spirit. Development partners must come up with means of implementation, both technology transfer and funds, to achieve this goal. Mr. President, this year marks the 75th anniversary of the milestone document, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This document is as relevant today as it was 75 years ago. The preservation of human rights set out in the Declaration is vital to each one of us. Violations of anyone's rights potentially undermine the rights of all of us. To conclude, I reiterate our commitment to continue working for ensuring human rights of all individuals all over the world, with the spirit of universality and without being selective. At the same time, being appreciative of advancement of societies and their own context. I thank you. Jai Bangla, Jai Bangabandhu.
I thank His Excellency for the statement. I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Nabil Ammar, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Migration and Tunisians Abroad of Tunisia. Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. Václav Balek, President of the Human Rights Council, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Volker Turk, High Commissioner for Human Rights, ladies and gentlemen. I am honoured to be among you today at this 52nd session of the Human Rights Council, which coincides with the 75th anniversary of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Here we renew our collective commitment to protecting human rights and fundamental freedoms on the basis of solidarity, cooperation, and mutual respect for state sovereignty. And I reiterate here Tunisia's historic commitment to promote and protect human rights and freedoms and to cooperate constructively with all of the mechanisms of this Council. At each stage of its history, drawing lessons from the past. Tunisia presented in November 2022 its national report at the Universal Periodic Review. Last February, it presented its report to the Committee for the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, and it is preparing to present its report to the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in the next few days. President, in recent years, Tunisia has adopted a number of instruments and measures to strengthen the human rights system in institutional, legislative and practical terms. And this commitment is reflected in the new Constitution of 25th July 2022, which reflects the Tunisian people's aspiration to build a new republic and a true democracy that serves Tunisians. There is an entire chapter on individual and public rights and freedoms, freedom of belief and of conscience, freedom of opinion, of thought, of expression, freedom of information and to transmit information. The rights of women, equality of all citizens are reaffirmed with the state's obligation to protect, promote and develop the rights of women and ensure equal opportunities for men and women. The Higher Council for Education and Teaching has been established. This is a new cornerstone of the institutional human rights architecture, bringing the right for quality education for all Tunisians without exclusion or discrimination. President, the democratic process in Tunisia has, over the past 10 years, had to face considerable obstacles because of political upheaval and bad governance, which dangerously weakened state institutions, in particular in the context of the health, social and economic crises. Parliament was not able to play its institutional role. It became the backdrop to violence and corruption, leading the President of the Republic on 25th July 2021 to enact Article 80 of the former constitution, suspending and then dissolving Parliament and implementing a political roadmap which has been fully complied with. That reform led to the adoption of a new constitution and the election of a new parliament, which will in the next few days be taking up its legislative role. These exceptional measures have been taken in full respect for rights and freedoms, which have been reaffirmed repeatedly despite all of the resistance arising from any transition process. I would emphasize that all of the detentions and the legal proceedings have been carried out on the basis of serious information connected with state security and not because of political or media activity by the persons concerned. In all cases, they remain citizens with all of their rights, who are, however, also accountable and responsible before the law without any distinction, like in any self-respecting democracy. Freedom of expression and the right to demonstrate are also guaranteed in the context of respect for freedoms and the dignity of others, ensuring that these freedoms, as Tunisians understand, do not serve as a pretext to spread rumours, defamation, or incite to hate speech, which denatures the very essence of democracy, as Tunisians were able to see to their cost over the past decade. Mr. President, our choice to establish a democracy that guarantees rights and freedoms is irreversible, in keeping with the historic path of our country. However, this democracy must also be authentic. It must meet the aspirations of Tunisians. It requires a reliable legal system protected from corruption, favoritism, and all other abuses. Thus, reform of the legal system is an absolute priority to ensure that justice is free of all obstacles or pressure, so that justice may carry out its crucial role in combating corruption, terrorism, and impunity. The institutional architecture will be complemented by the creation of the Constitutional Court, which will allow Tunisia to reach a higher level of protection of rights and freedoms. Mr. President, human rights are universal, interdependent, and indivisible. The enjoyment of civil and political rights cannot be achieved, as experience of all countries shows, without strengthening economic, social, and cultural rights, including the right to development. Tunisia's government has prioritized social and economic reforms, establishing the 2023-25 development plan, which confirms the country's commitment to making progress in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. But this national effort requires additional resources, including the return of funds unlawfully transferred abroad, which belong to the people of Tunisia. Tunisia has only been able to regain a very small part of these. It depends on real willingness to cooperate by the countries where those funds were deposited, and we are still waiting for that. We call on all states members to support and adopt the draft resolution on the adverse effects of non-return of funds of unlawful origin to countries of origin on the enjoyment of human rights, submitted at this session by the African Group at the initiative of Tunisia, Egypt, and Libya. Mr. President, the democratic reforming path followed by Tunisia is the result of the will of the Tunisian people. Throughout its history, it is determined to consolidate its democratic experience and continue its political progression towards a state based on the sovereignty of the people and the supremacy of the law. We call on all partners and the mechanisms of the Human Rights Council to hear and to respect the will of Tunisia's people and their wishes for reform and justice. We call on them to respect its sovereignty and to abstain from anything that could be perceived as interference in its internal affairs. Any action that could affect the independence of the judiciary, and to seek objective cooperation through constructive, positive dialogue. Tunisia, in the context of its history, has always shown an irreversible commitment to rights and freedoms and to strengthening them. It has been able to contribute to enriching the human rights system through initiatives and resolutions internationally, which have made it a regional and international leader, and it will persevere in these efforts, addressing the challenges and the difficulties. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Dawda Jallow, Attorney General and Minister of Justice of the Gambia. Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, I am honored to represent the Gambia at this high-level segment of the 52nd session of the Human Rights Council. Let me begin by conveying warm greetings from the people and government of the Republic of the Gambia, to also extend our gratitude to His Excellency Mr. Kasha Korosi, the President of the General Assembly, His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Mr. Volker Turk, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, and His Excellency Mr. Ignacio Cassis, the President of the Swiss Confederation, for participating in this 52nd session of the Council. In the same vein, I would like to extend our warmest congratulations to the Czech Republic and His Excellency Ambassador Vaclav for assuming the presidency of the Council for the 17th cycle, and would also like to express Gambia's gratitude to member states for their support of the Gambia as a member of the Council and as Vice President representing the African Group in the Bureau during the 16th and the 17th cycles. Mr. President, Excellencies, as the world continues to witness gross human rights violations, including violations against women, children, persons with disabilities, human trafficking, and persecution of ethnic and religious minorities, the Gambia joins the international community in condemning these atrocities and reaffirms our commitment to the principles of universality, indivisibility, and interdependence of human rights. The promotion and protection of human rights are fundamental to our country's vision of a democratic and prosperous society, and we remain committed to upholding these values both at home and abroad. Therefore, these sessions of the Council serve as a crucial opportunity for us to share our perspectives of the global human rights situation and to outline the steps we have taken to promote and protect human rights in our country. Mr. President, Excellencies, since the change of government in 2017, we have taken important steps to strengthen our democratic institutions, to protect human rights, to ensure accountability and promote rule of law in the Gambia. The establishment of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparation Commission was a significant step towards promoting human rights, justice, and reconciliation in our country, and following its successful completion in 2022, and 6 months after the submission of the report, the government released a white paper in accordance with the Act, accepting 263 out of 265 recommendations that were made. The recommendations address a wide range of issues, including justice and accountability, legal and institutional reforms, including legal and institutional reforms, reparations for victims, and the promotion of national healing and reconciliation. The government is currently concluding an implementation action plan for a comprehensive implementation of the recommendations of the TRRC. It is our objective to bring this plan to the end of this first quarter before all relevant stakeholders, including civil society, organizations and international community, for deliberation and identification of possible areas for intervention. Mr. President, Excellencies, as a nascent democracy, we are committed to making great strides in protecting the rights of women and children and have enacted legislation to combat domestic violence and gender-based discrimination in all its forms. More recently, in 2022, we have taken steps to promote the rights of persons with disabilities and to improve their access to public facilities, including transportation and public buildings, through the enactment of Persons with Disabilities Act. However, we recognize that much work remains to be done as we continue to face challenges relating to poverty, inequality, and discrimination, and we are committed to addressing these challenges through inclusive and participatory policies and programs. Mr. President and Excellencies, recalling the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its commitment to leave no one behind, in particular Goal 13 on taking urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts, the government of the Gambia has made remarkable advances in implementing the Paris Agreement on climate change. In addition, the Gambia has been actively engaged in international climate change forums and has been advocating for stronger action on climate change at global level. Despite the progress we have made, we've recognized that there is still much work to be done. The impact of climate change continues to pose significant challenges to our development aspirations, and we need to continue to support. We need continued support from the international community to address these challenges. Mr. President, Excellencies, we took note of the recent catastrophic happenings around the world, and the government of the Gambia joins the international community to express our deepest condolences to the people and governments of Turkey and Syria following the earthquake that have claimed many lives and caused extensive damage. We extend our sympathies to the families of the victims and stand in solidarity with the people and government of Turkey and Syria during this difficult time. These and many more tragedies that have occurred around the globe serve as stark reminders of the urgent need for the international community to work together to address challenges facing our world. We therefore call on the international community to come together and to provide all necessary assistance to those affected by these catastrophes and to work towards durable solutions to prevent further loss of lives and destruction. In the same vein, I would like to call on the international community to strongly condemn acts such as burning of the Holy Quran, as witnessed recently. Such acts amount to an affront on the dignity and human rights of Muslims and must never be confused with the right to freedom of expression. An expression to hate targeted at a major religious group can never be equated to the fundamental rights to freedom of expression. Mr. President, Excellencies, in conclusion, the Gambia believes that through multilateralism, countries can exchange experiences, share best practices, and coordinate efforts to address human rights challenges. This includes the promotion of international human rights standards, the strengthening of national human rights institutions, and the provision of support to countries facing human rights crises. Moreover, multilateralism ensures that no country is left behind in the pursuit of human rights, and that the international community works together to address systemic human rights issues that affect people worldwide, enabling us to hold each other accountable for human rights violations, as well as provide support to countries that are undergoing transitions towards more democratic and rights-based societies. Therefore, the Gambia reaffirms its commitment to promoting and protecting human rights and to working with the international community to advance this vital agenda. We call on all countries to join us in this effort and to support the principles of democracy, human rights, and rule of law. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Excellency. I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Mohammed Lamin Tarawale, Attorney General and Minister of Justice of Sierra Leone. Excellency, you have the floor.
The High Commissioner, Mr. President, Excellencies, let me from the outset convey the hearty congratulations to both the High Commissioner Volker Turk and the Council President, His Excellency Valka Balek, on their appointment. I assure of my delegation's firm support of your individual's mandate. Mr. President, Excellencies, I'm honored and gratified to address this esteemed Council at this 52nd session of the Human Rights Council, which is being convened during one of the most challenging moments in this Council's recent history. The adverse impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the rise in political instability and heightened global insecurity are factors that continue to threaten the work of this Council. The effect is felt in every corner of the globe, including my country, Sierra Leone. Human rights constitute an essential basis for peace, sustainable development, democratic consolidation, and strengthening of rule of law. Sierra Leone reaffirms its commitment to promoting and supporting proposals aimed at reinforcing the efficiency of the organs of this Council, including its procedures and mechanisms for the promotion and protection of human rights, guided by the principles of universality, objectivity, and non-selectivity. The recognition and protection of human rights and the fundamental freedoms are enshrined in the Constitution of Sierra Leone with a view of safeguarding human rights, human dignity as a common and intrinsic condition that applies to all individuals irrespective of their race, gender, ethnicity, place of origin, political or religious beliefs, sexual orientation. The enjoyment of these rights are subject only to the rights and freedoms of others and for public interest. Mr. President, Excellencies, since the reintroduction of the multi-party democracy in 1996 by His Excellency retired Brigadier Dr. Julius Maada Bio, President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, following years of dictatorship, Sierra Leone has enjoyed a peaceful transition of power from one administration to another. This peaceful democratic change underscores a new dawn characterized by the rule of law, with the people at the center of the process. Sierra Leone, under the leadership of His Excellency retired Brigadier Dr. Julius Maada Bio, has embarked on several policy reform initiatives with a view to safeguarding the fundamental human rights of all Sierra Leoneans. On that note, I am pleased to report that Sierra Leone has made remarkable strides in the promotion and protection of human rights. The government introduced legislative measures to further reinforce the independence of the justice system and reforms to demystify the law to expand access to justice. We sanctioned an unprecedented recruitment exercise to ensure the presence of judicial staff in every district in the country to service our courts, which culminated in the deployment of resident magistrates and judges in almost all districts in the country. This ambitious but worthy cause has considerably increased access to formal justice in hitherto hard-to-reach areas in the provinces. In addition, specialized courts have been established, such as the Anti-Corruption Court, the Sexual Offences Model Court, Social Security Court, and Small Claims Court. All these are steps to make justice not only accessible, but expeditious as well. There has been a considerable increase in the budgetary support to the judiciary, with judicial staff benefiting from improved conditions of service to help bring them in line with their counterparts in the sub-region. In a bid to strengthen democratic good governance and national cohesion, We have established a peace as well as a civic education commission, while consolidating the rule of law institutions such as the Human Rights Commission, which has recently re-accredited with a Grade A status for the third consecutive time by the Global Alliance for National Human Rights Institutions. Sierra Leone has established the Justice Sector Monitoring and Evaluation Unit and the Justice Sector Coordination Unit with the aim of promoting interaction between community justice providers and the formal justice system. We have rolled out a diversion and alternatives to detention framework for children through public engagement in all police stations throughout the country. Gender equality is a basic human right, and it is also fundamental to having a peaceful, prosperous world. The Hands Off Our Girls campaign, an initiative by the First Lady of the Republic of Sierra Leone to protect women and girls from sexual abuse and exploitation. During the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly, the President of Sierra Leone made a passionate plea for global solidarity on access to justice and remedies for survivors of sexual violence. He cited measures such as the establishment of the Sexual Offences Model Court in 2020 to fast-track sexual offences. Sierra Leone recognizes and is committed to gender equality and women's empowerment as a crucial element of attaining sustainable peace and social and economic development in the country. In this regard, our Parliament in November 2022 unanimously passed the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Bill and was signed into law by His Excellency the President Julius Maada Bio. This law is a monumental and advancement for gender equality in Sierra Leone, as it guarantees improvements to women's access to finance, employment opportunities, equal pay, maternity leave, women's participation, and political representation. The law establishes 30% quota for women's participation in government for both appointed positions, including cabinet, ministry, and ambassadorial roles, and elected positions such as parliamentary and local council seats. Mr. President, Excellencies, during the adoption of our third cycle UPR report, we took further steps to accept hereto recommendations that were noted following the previous UPRs, especially those on the ban against pregnant girls, sexual and gender-based violence, criminal libel, death penalty, because of a genuine desire and strong commitment to protect, promote, and respect human rights of those groups of persons most impacted by our decisions to note those recommendations. In this regard, a significant human rights milestone was achieved, and in the abolition of the death penalty and the repeal of the criminal libel law, which was a very great stride. We believe in the sanctity of life of every citizen, and that the death penalty was an inhumane form of punishment that violates the right to life and all human rights standards. Therefore, in July 2021, our Parliament again unanimously abolished the death penalty. By passing the Abolition of Death Penalty Act 2021, we committed to never again execute anyone for any reason whatsoever. In addition to further consolidate our democratic good governance and human rights, the President signed into law a repeal and expunge the criminal libel law, which criminalized free speech. In Sierra Leone today, Mr. President, Excellencies, no journalists, politicians, or human rights defenders and activists are in prison for expressing their views or defending human rights of others. From our third cycle of the UPR, we recognize some recommendations like those on consensual same-sex relationship and the criminalization of female genital mutilation are highly aspirational or acts to achieve ideals or outcomes that conflict with our national laws and cultural values. We subscribe to the principle that all human rights are indivisible, interdependent, and interrelated. Accordingly, this principle must be understood within the context of our national laws and cultural values that are quintessential to the identity of any society. Let me reiterate that our conviction in strengthening and improving our human rights situation is not motivated by sentiment and optimism, but rather it is rooted in our commitment and resolve, capacity and wartime experience to never again allow ourselves, our government and/or our laws to be used as instruments or be complicit in human rights violations. Mr. President, Excellencies, another significant human rights milestone is that we have signed all 9 fundamental human rights treaties and submitted initial and periodic reports on 5 of the treaties. These are clear demonstrations that as a nation, we are committed to undertaking actions that will improve our human rights record and our sustained engagement with these international human rights mechanisms demonstrate our government's commitment in this regard. We shall continue to collaborate and effectively participate in the affairs of all established regional and sub-regional human rights treaty bodies. Mr. President, Excellencies, the promotion and protection of human rights have often focused more on strengthening civil and political rights than on strengthening economic, social, and cultural rights. However, Sierra Leone continues to focus on both. We have made tremendous progress in the areas of the President's flagship program, the Free Quality Education, by allocating a quarter of our national budget to education, as he believes in human capital development as a pathway to sustainable development. We have also improved food security, increased access to reliable and affordable energy, made remarkable strides in the fight against corruption and justice sector reforms. We have expanded and improved healthcare, disease prevention, control and surveillance, healthcare delivery, which has led to a significant decrease in the maternal mortality rates. Mr. President, Excellencies, my government is resolved to make Sierra Leone safe, for all, and our respect for fundamental human rights shall not be derailed. My government is saddened by the event of August 10, 2022, a violent insurrection which led to the loss of lives and property. My government has taken concrete steps to hold accountable all those involved, irrespective of their political persuasion or clout. Mr. President, Excellencies, we reaffirm our unflinching support for this Council's Resolution 910 to help promote economic, social, and environmental policies and actions that would protect people and nature. We reiterate our unwavering support to establish sub-regional, regional, and global rights treaty bodies by effectively participating in their affairs. Let me conclude, Mr. President, Excellencies, by reiterating our full support and commitment for the work of this Council. As I return to Capital, I wish all of you a successful and fruitful 52nd session of this body. On behalf of the President and the people of Sierra Leone, and on behalf of my delegation, I thank you all.
Thank you, Excellency. I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Omar Ahmad Berjinzi, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Iraq. Excellency, you have the floor.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السيد رئيس مجلس حقوق الإنسان.
President of the Human Rights Council, High Commissioner for Human Rights, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my very great pleasure to take part in the high-level segment of the 52nd session of the Human Rights Council and to address you on behalf of His Excellency Mr. Fuad Hussein, Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Iraq. I'd like to congratulate Mr. Václav Balek for his election as President of the Human Rights Council for 2023. I congratulate the members of the Bureau and wish them every success in their mission. I also present my congratulations to Mr. Volker Turk for his nomination as High Commissioner for Human Rights President. Since the high-level segment of last year, Iraq has undertaken developments on the legislative and institutional levels. On the 27th of October 2022, the new Iraqi government, headed up by His Excellency President Mohammed al-Sudani, gained the confidence of the Iraqi parliament and presented an ambitious program for government which had a number of pillars relating to reform in the economic, finance and services sectors and the establishment of effective tools to combat corruption in all its forms, as well as to combat poverty, unemployment and the stepping up of the reconstruction process of the freed areas which were under the control of Islamic State, as well as the finalization of a number of domestic dossiers on the basis of human rights. The aim of these measures is to establish good governance and lessen the challenges faced by citizens while combating inflation, establish stability, guarantee the respect for law, return the prestige of the country and support the people, including young people generally. A minister has been designated whose mandate is to immediately combat all human rights violations without forgetting the drafting of legislation, policies and national plans in line with the provisions of the Iraqi constitution and international human rights bodies. President, at the legislative level, the Iraqi government is working hand in hand with the parliament to review the law on freedom of expression, freedom of assembly and freedom of peaceful protest, as well as on the review of the law to combat terrorism and other bills which relate to the following issues: combating torture, protecting against enforced disappearance, health insurance, domestic violence, and indeed proposals aimed at amending the Iraqi criminal code in line with Iraq's international obligations in the sphere of human rights. Iraq has made significant legislative progress in the sphere of justice and reparations thanks to the promulgation of the law on Yazidi survivors. This law recognizes that the crimes committed against the Yazidi Christians, Turkmens, Shabak and the other groups of the Iraqi population constitutes the crime of genocide. In terms of empowerment of women, through the strengthening of their essential role in the development process, a national team has been established with a view to preparing the general framework for the National Strategy for Women 2023 to 2030. This team has finalized our draft strategy, which is going to be launched very soon. The recent elections strengthened the participation of women in leadership roles because 97 women are MPs now in Parliament. That's 29% of the Parliament. In addition, 3 women are members of the current government, and other women have taken up posts in the judiciary, the university sector, and other decision-making positions. Accountability is a key priority for the Iraqi government, and our work is ongoing with the United Nations survey team to ensure accountability as a result of crimes conducted by Islamic State, and this is running through the collect and analysis of evidence. The government is continuing its efforts to ensure all accountability is created around the subject of all violations committed in terms of freedom of expression and peaceful demonstration. In policy terms, the government has approved the Human Rights Plan 2021 to 2025 in order to guide the work of all institutions working in the sphere, including civil society. And I should also mention the implementation of the UPR recommendations that were accepted by Iraq, as well as the recommendations issued by human rights treaty bodies. These have been implemented with the participation of civil society. On the institutional level, Iraq continues to strengthen its human rights institutions on the basis of the Iraqi constitution. That constitution has 33 articles explicitly dealing with promoting rights and freedoms. Iraq is on the point of putting in place a ministerial council responsible for human rights. We are also having ongoing discussions around the establishment of a new Commissioners' Council in line with the Paris Principles, and that is on the request of the exiting Council. Has respected its commitments and also has allocated the necessary human and financial resources in line with the principles governing the UNHRC's President. In the context of our international obligations, we have reviewed this and submitted the latest report to the ICCPR, the second periodic report on the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel and Inhuman Degrading Treatment or Punishment, was reviewed in April 2022. In addition, Iraq has also submitted its fifth periodic report on economic, social and cultural rights. And the report, indeed, the mid-term report on the UPR. Iraq will also be submitting its report on the elimination of all forms of racial discrimination once the draft report has been approved at national level. Iraq also hosted the International Committee on Combating the combating disappearances, and we held meetings with governmental meetings as well as NGOs and individuals. And this in order to ensure that we could comply with our mandate and was abreast of the entire situation. We also hosted the 52nd session of the Arab Human Rights Inter-Arab Human Rights Committee. We also have an open invitation to all mandate holders and are committed to the principle of transparency, dialogue, promotion and the respect of human rights. I would like in that context to address an invitation to Mr. Volker Turk, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, to visit Iraq according to a timescale that we might mutually agree. President, in terms of internally displaced persons, Iraq has made efforts which have been greeted by the relevant international bodies. The atrocities committed in 2014 by terrorist groups under Islamic State's aegis have led to the displacement of more than 6 million people, and Iraq has managed to resolve the situation confronted by the majority of those displaced people. In 2022, we had the clearance as well of more than 900 square kilometers of mined land. We have rehabilitation of victims. The vast majority of IDPs have been returned to their homes, and around 37,000 families are still nonetheless in refugee camps, and we are undertaking ongoing work to ensure their return and close those refugee camps in line with the international obligations in the sphere. Turning to the Yazidi, the Cabinet approved on the 12th of December 2022 a decree recognizing properties of Yazidi in Sinjar after 47 years refusing to recognize their right to own property due to discriminatory and exclusive policies practiced by the previous dictatorship. This decision is now being made in the context of the clear and explicit will of the Iraqi government to take care of all components of Iraqi society, including the Yazidi. We reiterate our commitment to the values which strengthen family values the threshold, the cornerstone of society, and we reiterate our belief in the sacred relationship between men and women. We recall our societal commitments, and that must be a constant basis for its constitution, its values, and the will of its people. We reiterate the importance of protecting children from all guidance threatening their innocence and undermining family life. In conclusion, Iraq reiterates its commitment to democratic tools, good governance, and the promotion and protection of human rights. Iraq is determined to contribute to efforts aimed at strengthening the status of the Human Rights Council, because it is the UN's key body responsible for the promotion and protection of human rights. This council must work far from politicization on the basis of genuine constructive dialogue between states. We reaffirm our determination to continue our work with the High Commissioner for Human Rights in the context of the mandate given to him, and the government of Iraq will continue to answer the expectations of its people and to work to support the human dignity of all its citizens. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Excellency. I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Wojciech Jovel, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland. Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to address this Council. Over the last 3 years, Poland, as a proud member of the Council, called for respect for values and principles enshrined in the UN Charter, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and international law. Let me reaffirm Poland's unwavering commitment to human rights and fundamental freedoms around the world, and to underline the importance of multilateralism. Ladies and gentlemen, the Russian aggression against Ukraine has changed the world. Russia totally disregarded international law and the UN principles and unleashed a brutal and blatant war. For more than a year now, we have been receiving almost daily reports of horrific atrocities committed by the Russian forces. Each human rights violation has a name of a victim, a name of a place, a name of a horror. Mariupol, Bucha, Irpin, Hostomel, killings, torture, sexual violence, arbitrary detentions, and forced disappearances, intentional attacks on civilian infrastructure, unlawful deportations, missile attacks on Ukrainian cities. The list goes on and on. Russian-occupied territories of Ukraine are becoming lawless zones with restricted access to humanitarian aid. But let us be clear, those responsible for committing violations will be held accountable. Without accountability, human rights will be denied, crime will flourish, and impunity for conflict-related crimes will persist, undermining legitimacy and prospects for peace. Poland supports international initiatives towards ensuring accountability and adequate redress of all wrongs inflicted by Russia in the course of this war. The Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine, established last year by this Council, is an important element on this path. We will further support Human Rights Council mechanisms to seek justice for all victims of this unjustified invasion and to put an end human rights violations. Luckily, there is still a lot of compassion and solidarity around the world. International community stepped up and provided assistance to refugees fleeing Ukraine. Since February 24, 2022, over 9.5 million Ukrainians have crossed the border of my own country alone. I am proud to say that 1.5 million Ukrainian refugees found protection in Poland and enjoy the same access to public services as Polish citizens. 95% of them are women and children. They found safe places in Polish homes and hearts, so no refugee camp was necessary. Ladies and gentlemen, being a strong supporter of UN system and the Human Rights Council, utmost need to respect freedom of assembly and association, freedom of expression, freedom of religion or belief. We are seriously concerned over restrictions imposed in these regards around the world. Here again, we reiterate our objection to silencing dissenting voices or persecuting civil society and human rights defenders. Unfortunately, this is the case of independent activists in Russia and Belarus. There seem to be no red lines for these regimes anymore. We cannot tolerate muffling of the voices of human rights defenders and independent journalists with a deafening sound of slamming prison doors. Last year, Russian Memorial was ordered to dissolve, and many opposition leaders and civil society representatives are persecuted. Among them, Alexei Navalny, Yuri Dmitriev, Ilya Yashin, Andrei Pivovarov, Vladimir Kara-Murza, Alexei Gorinov, or Yulia Chanisheva. This month, the Belarusian regime sentenced Andrzej Poczobut, a member of Polish national minority and journalist, to 8 years in prison under false and politically motivated allegations. His name is now a symbol of a myriad oppressions towards Polish national minority carried out by the Lukashenko regime, such as arbitrary arrests, systemic elimination of the Polish language from the public education system, attacks against Polish cultural associations, and demolishing of Polish cemeteries and memorials. Free and independent civil society is essential for human rights. We trust that the Nobel Peace Prize awarded last year to human rights advocates, Ales Bialyatsky from Belarus, the Russian Memorial, and the Ukrainian Center for Civil Liberties, will be an encouragement for those struggling for truth, peace, and democracy in other parts of the world. I call upon Russian and Belarusian authorities to abide by international human rights obligations. Here I can only add Poland's solid support for all Human Rights Council special procedures and mechanisms. In particular, let me highlight the newest mandate of the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Situation in Russia, which we hope will swiftly become operational. Ladies and gentlemen, promotion and protection of the right to freedom of religion or belief for all individuals will remain Poland's top priority. In the 21st century, there is no place for discrimination, intolerance and violence, especially towards those belonging to religious minorities, as we observe in Nigeria, Iraq or Crimea. We also remain committed to protecting those in vulnerable situations, women, children and persons with disabilities, especially in conflict situations. We underline the importance of access to education by women and girls. Poland strongly opposes women's exclusion from political, economic, educational and social life. We find it unacceptable that some countries around the world, such as Iran and the PRK, still use death penalty, which is a serious violation of human rights and human dignity. Poland will stand for promoting principles of democracy and good governance. It is through just and transparent institutions that human rights can be best fulfilled. Ladies and gentlemen, only by working together will we be able to overcome the challenges we face. I believe that the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights should inspire our collective efforts to protect, promote and fulfill human rights around the world. I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Excellency. I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Elnur Israfil Oglu, Mammadov, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Azerbaijan. You have the floor, Excellency.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset, let me express my appreciation for the opportunity to address the 52nd session of the Human Rights Council. I would also like to congratulate His Excellency Ambassador Václav Balek on his appointment as the President of the Human Rights Council, and His Excellency Mr. Volker Türk for having recently assumed the role of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. I am delivering this statement on a very symbolic day for Azerbaijan-UN relations, since today, March 2nd, marks the 31st anniversary of the membership of Azerbaijan to the United Nations family. Over the past 3 decades, Azerbaijan has proved itself as a responsible member of the UN. Through its engagement across the 3 pillars of the UN activities, peace and security, development and human rights, Azerbaijan has been contributing to the achievement of the purposes and advancement of the principles enshrined in the UN Charter. As one of the founding members of the Human Rights Council, Azerbaijan has been supporting the role of the HRC as a credible and responsive global human rights body. As we mark this year the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Azerbaijan remains actively engaged in cooperation and intends to further extend constructive dialogue with the UN human rights bodies and mechanisms. In 2022 and early this year, periodic reports of Azerbaijan under the International Convention on the Elimination of all forms of racial discrimination, the Convention on the Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, and the Convention on the Rights of the Child were successfully reviewed. The Republic of Azerbaijan is resolute in its continued efforts to provide for strong, cohesive, and targeted global actions to recover better from COVID-19. In this regard, the initiative on establishing a UN high-level panel on global recovery from COVID-19 put forward by the President of Azerbaijan is being discussed at the Non-Aligned Movement Contact Group Summit meeting, which is held in Baku today. In its resolution 49/8, initiated by Azerbaijan on behalf of the NAM, the Human Rights Council decided to hold a high-level meeting commemorating the 35th anniversary of the Declaration on the Right to Development at its current session. The meeting, organized here 2 days ago by Azerbaijan in cooperation with OHCHR, provided an opportunity for the international community to demonstrate and reaffirm its commitment to the effective realization of the right to development. Our government is steadfast in its determination to ensure the equal enjoyment of human rights and freedoms by all of its citizens. The ongoing reforms encompass a wide range of activities, including adoption of new legislative acts, improvement of social protection of the population, particularly of vulnerable groups, support to the development of judiciary, public administration, and the like. 2022-2026 National Action Plan to strengthen the fight against corruption serves to consolidate the anti-corruption efforts of various agencies and increase transparency, improve the quality of services provided by the government agencies, and enhance the role of civil society institutions in organizing public oversight and exposing corruption. The State Agency for Public Service and Social Innovations under the President of Azerbaijan ensures uniformed and coordinated public services delivery and brings together representatives of government agencies and private companies in providing more than 300 services through a public-private partnership. The winner of United Nations Public Service Award, Asan Service, has recently been awarded the Global Government Excellence Award for promoting innovation in government practices and building prosperous societies. Having said that, I am pleased to inform that Azerbaijan, together with other members of the core group, will present a draft resolution on promoting human rights and the SDGs through transparent, accountable, and efficient public service delivery as a follow-up to the Resolution 37/7 on the same topic, which was adopted by consensus by this Council in 2018. Mr. President, we condemn the rising phenomena of racism, racial discrimination and xenophobia in some parts of the world. The recent despicable acts against Holy Quran constitute hate crime and are a clear example of Islamophobia. The state should take appropriate measures with a view to addressing these actions and promoting interfaith and intercultural dialogue. Dear colleagues, my country has entered a strategic phase in the post-conflict era following liberation of our sovereign and internationally recognized territories, which were under unlawful military occupation by Armenia for almost 3 decades. The occupation, which was unanimously condemned by the United Nations Security Council in its 4 resolutions adopted in 1993, which resolutions were ignored by Armenia. Rehabilitation and reconstruction of now liberated territories have been identified as one of the main directions of the development priority of Azerbaijan in the coming years. One of the most important obstacles hampering this process and the safe and dignified return of hundreds of thousands of Azerbaijanis ethnically cleansed from their homeland by Armenia is massive contamination of these territories with mines laid during the years of occupation, and Armenia's blatant refusal to release accurate maps of these minefields. Since the end of the conflict in 2020, 282 Azerbaijanis have fallen victims of mine explosions. The 30-year-long occupation of our territories and long-standing aggression by Armenia was one of the key factors seriously impeding the full-fledged implementation of the relevant SDGs by Azerbaijan. The liberation of Azerbaijani territories revealed the full extent of the ecocide and adverse irreversible impact to the ecosystem committed by Armenia. Last year, United Nations Environmental Programme undertook a scoping mission to the liberated territories of Azerbaijan, which revealed massive damage to the environmental ecosystem in the formerly occupied territories, as well as illegal mining and quarrying operations, which were described as, and I quote, some of the most aggressive and destructive forms of quarrying, end quote, that were carried out without due regard to the environmental impact. We have initiated several international legal proceedings in various fora in order to hold Armenia to account for the devastating consequences of the armed aggression against Azerbaijan. For more than a year, the government of Azerbaijan has been raising the issue of illegal economic activities in the territories of Azerbaijan, where the Russian peacekeeping contingent is temporarily deployed. The government of Azerbaijan has taken a series of steps to address through dialogue the issue of continued illegal exploitation of mineral deposits in that area, including its harsh environmental consequences. However, the Armenian side blocked the access to this territory and has caused the legitimate objection of the Azerbaijani public. Since last December, a group of civil society representatives started a peaceful demonstration demanding the prevention of illegal exploitation of natural resources of Azerbaijan and abuse of the Lachin Road, which is intended for humanitarian purposes, in line with the trilateral statement signed in November 2020. Recently, the International Court of Justice has also considered this matter. We welcome the court's rejection of Armenia's requested measures requiring Azerbaijan to cease its alleged orchestration and support of the peaceful process and immediately restore the provision of natural gas and other utilities to Karabakh. The court also took note of our representation that Azerbaijan has and undertakes to continue to take all steps within its power and at its disposal to guarantee safe movement along the Lachin Road. The order also supports Azerbaijan's long-standing position that it is not responsible for the protests of a group of civil society organizations and is not obligated to prevent them from exercising their legitimate right to protest. On a related note, we call on Armenia to comply with the legally binding order of the court issued against Armenia on 7 December 2021 and demanding that Armenia take all necessary measures to prevent the incitement and promotion of racial hatred, including by organizations and private persons on its territory, targeted at persons of Azerbaijani national or ethnic origin. The large-scale innovative initiatives and incentives launched in the liberated areas of Azerbaijan, such as Green Energy Zone, Smart City, the target to reach to turn this area into a net zero emission zone by 2050 will altogether transform the liberated territories into one of the most developed and cleanest regions of Azerbaijan. I am glad to inform you that the first displaced families have started returning to their homes in a newly rebuilt village in the Dangilan district of Azerbaijan after 30 years. Azerbaijan remains committed to regional peace, stability, and development. Establishing good neighborly relations is a key for building secure, stable, and prosperous South Caucasus through full-fledged regional normalization. It was Azerbaijan that, after the end of the conflict, initiated the process of normalizing of interstate relations with Armenia, based on mutual respect for each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity within the internationally recognized borders. We call on Armenia to return to the negotiating table to achieve these long-term objectives in the interest of both nations and seek support of the international community to this end. On a separate track, we have also initiated talks with local Armenian residents of the Karabakh region of Azerbaijan with the aim of their full reintegration into the Azerbaijani society. At the end, let me once again underline that as a staunch advocate of the international law and multilateralism, Azerbaijan will continue to be a reliable partner of the United Nations and will spare no effort in further contributing to the international peace and security and protecting and promoting human rights. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Josip Brkić, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my special honor and pleasure to address you today at the high-level segment of the session of Human Rights Council. I take this opportunity to express Bosnia and Herzegovina position and to summarize our accomplishments and improvements at the national global level in the protection of human rights during the last year. At the outset, I would like to commend and support the efforts and role of Human Rights Council have played in the arena of protection and promotion of human rights globally, and also focusing on specific countries as well as the respective thematic issues. Congratulating Ambassador Václav Balek on taking over the important position of the President of the Human Rights Council in 2023, and to express our gratitude for the dedicated work that Ambassador Federico Villegas carried out presiding over the Council in 2022. Also allow me to congratulate Volker Turk, newly appointed High Commissioner, and his office's proactive role in addressing challenges facing all our societies, despite the financial constraints and crisis that continues to challenge all of us, particularly in the context of human rights. I would like to reiterate our support to Turkey and Syria after devastating earthquakes. Our record times Bosnia and Herzegovina dispatched rescue teams to assist in the rescue operations. We also sent a number of convoys with the most urgent aid and items to the affected areas and provided financial support. As we gathered here today, unfortunately we mark 1 year of the Russian aggression in Ukraine, with no clear perspective of the ending of the conflict. We are concerned by the rising civilian death toll, mass displacement, and the destruction of civilian objects. The humanitarian situation in Ukraine worsened sharply in 2022, where a large number of people have to leave Ukraine, resulting in a major humanitarian crisis. We welcome recent UNOCHA and UNHCR appeal for Humanitarian Response Plan 2023, requesting $5.6 billion to ease the suffering of millions of people affected. This being said, I would like to emphasize that Bosnia and Herzegovina is ready to share its experience and lessons learned from the horrific experience we passed through not so long ago. If anyone understands the horrors of war, it is Bosnia and Herzegovina, because we went through war in the 90s that left deep scars. We are witnessing gross violations of international human rights law, possible war crimes, and serious violations of humanitarian law in Ukraine. Bosnia and Herzegovina supports all efforts of the international community to end the gross violations of fundamental rights of Ukrainian people. To this regard, our country has aligned itself with statements and declarations of the UN, EU, as well as restrictive measures related to the situation in Ukraine. More recently, just a few days ago, we endorsed the last UN General Assembly resolution underscoring the urgency to find a lasting peace in Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, after general elections in October 2022, we have, in record time, established the government in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Furthermore, as it was agreed by all ruling parties, the electoral law should be amended no later than 6 months from the establishment of Government of Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. These amendments are also the part of the obligations that the parliamentary majority has got from the Constitutional Court of Bosnia and Herzegovina and the European Courts of Human Rights. As there are several models, several solutions that still need to be redefined, I'm convinced that we will come to engagement about the amendments very soon. There is a political will on all sides for that. We are witnessing positive steps regarding our future in the European Union as we have obtained the candidacy status for the membership in the EU in December 2022. As a candidate for full membership in the European Union, we will use this an additional impetus to align ourselves more closely with EU standards, including in the area of human rights and fundamental freedoms. There are challenging times ahead of us, but we are committed to reform process and fulfill 14 priorities of the EU path as well as NATO integration. As a signatory state of numerous human rights conventions, Bosnia and Herzegovina will continue to fulfill its commitment under the human rights instruments, especially in relation to the rights of refugees and displaced persons, the rights of child, the rights of national minorities, efforts to eliminate racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia and similar intolerance, and advocates for their fulfillment by other states, member states of the UN and the Council of Europe. In this regard, the visit of Ms. Michelle Bachelet, former High Commissioner, last June to Bosnia and Herzegovina provided an important opportunity to discuss an area of human rights issues and challenges that we in Bosnia and Herzegovina, along with our institutions, including civil society, have been striving to uphold and implement on a sustainable basis. Last December, we also had a visit by the Subcommittee on the Prevention of Torture. We are waiting for a report which will contain the subcommittee's observations and recommendations to improve the legal framework and the implementation mechanism. This January, a special rapporteur on the promotion and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms while countering terrorism also paid a visit to Bosnia and Herzegovina. The rapporteur welcomed the preliminary action undertaken by our government to enable and support speedy repatriation of our citizens caught in Syrian conflict. We stay committed to implementation of the recommendations regarding the third periodic report within the framework of the Universal Periodic Review process, as we are getting ready to fulfill our obligations under the framework preparing for the fourth UPR cycle. Bosnia and Herzegovina has recognized the importance of the Agenda 2030 as an opportunity to significantly improve social, economic and environmental aspects of life within the country and to enhance the regional cooperation. We will continue to implement this agenda and sustainable development goals. Bosnia and Herzegovina will continue to engage in the work of multilateral fora about human rights and humanitarian issues and is a strong proponent of the protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms in compliance with the international instrument that has signed and obligations deriving from those treaties. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Excellencies, distinguished participants, this was the last speaker on my list for this meeting. We will reconvene at 3 p.m. to continue the high-level and general segments. I hereby close the 9th meeting of the 52nd session of the Human Rights Council.